Alright, final piece before you guys can get a jump on Brainbusters I and even a good portion of Brainbusters II. So, the last part I want to talk about real quick is what it means to commit error. So, the way Gary has 3302 set up, he's going to ask you a lot of questions about these different types of error and when we commit it, or do we have a chance of committing this type of error or that type. So let me clear up what these guys are. So, the first type we're going to talk about is a type 1 error. This is also referred to as an alpha error. So if you think about 1 being the beginning of the numbers and A or alpha being the beginning of the letters, you can connect those two. They go together. So a type 1 error is when we reject the null hypothesis. But, and this is the tricky part, so when we reject the null hypothesis, we're saying that there is a statistically significant difference between the two sets of values that I'm looking at. The null is what tells us there is no difference. So by rejecting that, I'm essentially saying, hey, there really is a difference between these two numbers. A type 1 alpha error is when we reject that null and say there is a difference when really there isn't. So let me see if I can explain. So I reject the null, but there is really no statistically significant difference. Now there's an important piece of this that you've got to understand. In order to reject the null hypothesis, we have to have this situation where I have a t-value that is greater than my critical t-value. So committing this error isn't something that I do just because I read these wrong or because my t-value was less but I thought it was more. This type of error is when I look at the numbers, I really do have a t-value that's greater than my critical, so I reject the null, but what's happening is there really isn't any statistically significant difference. My statistics didn't tell me that, but something's going on here. So this is the error when I reject the null, like my statistics told me to do, but really there isn't a statistically significant difference. I should have accepted it, but the numbers told me otherwise. And that's real important. So a type 2 error is very similar. So type 2, second number, also beta or B, so second letter here. This is a situation where I accept the null. So I'm saying, hey, by accepting the null, there is no statistically significant difference. Or the differences that I'm seeing between these two different sets of numbers is just random chance. That's what it means to accept the null. However, when I commit a beta error, I'm accepting the null, but there really is something other than random chance causing, sorry about my handwriting, guys, the differences. And I want to make sure that this makes good sense. So in this situation, just like before, I had a t-value that was less than my critical. So in that situation, hey, t-value is less than the critical, I accept the null. That's fine. I did the right thing. I made the right choice, so it seems. But in this situation, what we're saying is there really is something other than random chance that's causing these differences. That's where the error comes in. So you're going to see Gary asking you a question like, you run a statistical test, and I always say Gary, even though I teach the course. Gary put it together, and it's a great course, but I like to blame him for the confusion if it ever comes up. So, for example, he might say, hey, you have a t-value of 2.110 and a critical t-value of 2.211. And then he'll say, do you have a 1% chance of committing a type 1 or alpha error? So I remember when I went through the course as a student, and even as I teach this, I always have to go, okay, crap, what's he saying? Okay, if he's saying alpha error, what I want you to remember is alpha error always says I'm rejecting the null. So to reject the null, I have to have a t-value greater than my critical t-value. So if I look here, my t-value is not greater than my critical. It's less. So when my t-value is less than my critical, I accept the null. So the point I'm making here is if this is the situation, whoa, sorry about that. If this is a situation where I have a t-value that is less than my critical, I have no chance of committing an alpha or a type 1 error. I can't do this because that requires that I reject the null. These values require that I accept the null. So the only thing I could do in this situation is commit a beta error. That's the one where I accept the null. Don't get confused, because we will try to confuse you.